Imagine this. You're about to undergo surgery and anesthesia is administered. Your body continues to function, but your mind is slipping away. Does your brain completely shut down? Does something remain active? What fades? How does this happen? How does anesthesia disrupt the signals in our brain to bring about this loss of consciousness, or LOC? Today, I'll be presenting findings from the paper Anesthesia-induced loss of consciousness disrupts auditory responses beyond primary cortex, a study by Krom in 2020 that investigates this profound mystery by looking at how our brain processes sound during anesthesia. This study seeks to answer a central question in neuroscience. Does anesthesia disrupt the pathways that bring sensory information from deeper parts of the brain to the surface, or does it affect how different areas of the brain communicate with each other? Let's break this down. The researchers proposed two key ideas. One, the part of the brain responsible for basic sound processing, the primary auditory cortex, or PAC, would keep functioning under anesthesia. Think of the PAC as the brain's sound hub. It is the first place where noises get processed in the brain before moving on to other areas. The second key idea is that brain regions beyond the primary auditory cortex, called association cortices, would show disruptions. These areas are primarily found in the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes of the brain. These areas act like interpreters that help us connect sounds to meaning, like recognizing voices or understanding speech. To explore these two hypotheses, the researchers studied 8 epilepsy patients who already had electrodes implanted in their brains for medical treatment. These electrodes acted as tiny microphones, picking up the electrical signals of brain activity. During the study, the patients listened to sounds, including rhythmic clicks consisting of click trains, which are a series of auditory clicks at a rate of 40 clicks per second, and spoken words. As they gradually became unconscious from an anesthetic drug called propofol, they would listen to these sounds. Propofol is commonly used to make patients fall asleep during surgeries. The researchers tracked how brain activity changed by comparing responses during wakefulness to those after the patients stopped responding, a clear sign that they had lost consciousness. They measured the power change from wakefulness, before loss of consciousness, and during anesthesia. What actually happened in the brain during this loss of consciousness? The primary auditory cortex stayed active under anesthesia. Association cortices were disrupted, gamma waves and brain activity were changed, and higher order regions varied. The sound hub, or PAC, continued to process sounds even after the patient had lost consciousness. This means that the initial delivery of sound signals to the brain, like mail arriving at a post office, remained intact. Figure E represents a quantitative analysis across all primary auditory cortex responses, revealing 70% of these responses were not significantly different between wakefulness and anesthesia. In contrast, the association cortices, or interpreters of the brain, which are areas that give sounds meaning, lost their ability to respond consistently. This showed that the connections between different brain regions were breaking down. Figure H reveals that 65% of these responses undergo significant reduction under anesthesia. The researchers observed an intriguing change in gamma waves, which are like the brain's high-energy signals that help it focus. While gamma power increased during anesthesia, the usual synchronized communication between brain cells, measured by their spike signals, broke down. Imagine two musicians who normally play in sync suddenly going out of rhythm. 71% of responses were significantly attenuated, and none were significantly potentiated. areas beyond the primary auditory cortex showed mixed responses. For example, in one region, sound responses completely faded, while in another, they became slightly stronger. Shown in Figure I, which is a plot of all 50 responding contacts and 34 responding microwires, colored according to gain in gamma power under anesthesia. These responses are clustered exclusively around the temporal lobe, and in 83 out of 84 cases show an increased power or no change. What do these findings mean? The results suggest that anesthesia affects how different parts of the brain communicate rather than blocking the brain's ability to detect sounds. This challenges older ideas such as the thalamic gating theory, which proposed that anesthesia shuts down signal delivery entirely. Instead, it's more like the brain's networks. Its highways of information get disconnected, particularly in areas responsible for complex tasks, including understanding and remembering. This study highlights that anesthesia-induced loss of consciousness doesn't entirely shut down the brain, but instead disrupts communication between its regions. By understanding this, researchers can better develop anesthetic drugs that minimize side effects and improve tools to monitor patients during surgery. As we learn more about how the brain loses consciousness, and we can come closer to answering some of neuroscience's biggest questions. What exactly is consciousness, and how does the brain hold on to it or let it slip away? Thank you for listening.